Firewatch is a game about running away. Every major character suffers from a chronic inability to confront their past, and every character suffers an inability to move beyond loss. Firewatch is also a game about loss. Firewatch opens on a text-based selection of dialogue choices. He plays a man who's watched his wife suffer from dementia, degenerate before him, forget him. When push comes to shove, he runs away. When push came to shove, I ran away. My father suffers a myriad of psychiatric issues. Even family members make fun of him, laugh because they don't know how to handle something so terrible. The neighbors fear him as a boogeyman coming to break down their doors. I live with the failure Henry does, and the failure Ned does, and Delilah. And while I've long since accepted my feelings, if not entirely moved past them, it's rare that I feel I can discuss them. Firewatch isn't much of a game. It's a walking simulator through and through, but it does serve as a release to many things I've felt since running away. Henry's wife had dementia, Delilah can't deal with any amount of tension, and Ned lost his son, and they're all people who refuse to confront that reality, as I have in my own way. Firewatch was a well-received game, especially given its genre, and released for PS4 and PC in 2016, with an Xbox One version coming a few months later in 2016, and the Switch getting it 2 years later after that. And it was developed by Campo Santo, a studio made of former Telltale and DoubleFine alum who have since gone on to be devoured by Valve, with their second title, In the Valley of the Gods, being put on indefinite postponement as they worked on Steam backend stuff, Half-Life Alyx, and some shit called DOTA Underlords, which is like a Dota gacha or something. Safe to say, Campo Santo is basically dead. Firewatch ain't much of a game. It's a walking simulator. You wander around a pretty forest, and that's a pretty good majority of it. There's occasional minor interactions. You find new items that open up new areas in a vague approximation of a Metroidvania structure, but there's never really a mystery where or when they're used, as the game is very linear despite being vaguely open worlds. The primary source of interaction in Firewatch is speaking to Delilah, a fellow Firewatch person, and your only company out there, with multiple responses to pretty much everything she says, which, while not playing a role in the way the story plays out, slowly bonds you to her as a person, and that relationship, however much you engage with it, is central to the story. Plus it's core for elements of the backstory of numerous places and characters, and honestly, it's just fun. The two characters are extremely well acted and have a strong rapport that helps fill the gaps between the world as you wander place to place. Mostly covers the gameplay. That is to say, not much, but there are two side modes worth mentioning. One is free roam, where you can go into the woods to just chill. The map is extremely relaxing and pretty, but there isn't much to say about it beyond that it would make for a nice screensaver. The audio tour is much more interesting, essentially being a developer commentary mode a la Half-Life 2, which has some interesting tidbits, primarily from the artists and graphic designers involved, as well as the writers, who have nice insights on the construction of a game like this, but there is a notable lack of fun gameplay stories, outside of a handful of complicated events where they tried to predict how Delilah should react, and a quick mention that when you could pick up any object in the environment, characters were surfing around on them. It's just hard. There isn't a lot of gameplay to break or have interesting stories about. The Half-Life 2 commentary's best moments were funny stories of playtesters being stupid, and in a game this relatively limited, it never really gets to come up, which is kind of a shame. For a game with no gameplay, Firewatch has to make up for it in any other way it can, and it does so in spades. The world of Firewatch is beautiful. Its open world is fairly limited in scope and quite full of walls, but it has an incredible art style, especially as it hits sunset, where the colors are at their orangiest and strongest. The wilderness is quiet, broken up with distant rustling and animal sounds, and music is used very sparingly, usually just a brief acoustic guitar melody to highlight the serenity. The game is a painting, and you're in the middle of it, finding small remnants of people long gone, stories of the land, and an unfolding mystery. You never really see characters, you're alone at almost all times, and the world accentuates that loneliness at times too, from quiet night walks to the increasingly dire way the world looks as the large fire grows, obscuring the beautiful skylines in grays and smoke. It begins to shift the tone to an ominous one that it nails as strongly as it does the serenity. The music doesn't maintain the peace either. As the game darkens, so too does the music, and as the mystery unravels, there are some wonderfully intense and different themes, especially the sting of the big discovery, which is perfectly orchestrated, somber piece, but Henry and Delilah's paranoia also triggers an incredibly cinematic, synthetic tone befitting of a thriller. Of course, the biggest thing making Firewatch work is acting. For a good majority of the game, it's Henry, the player character voiced by Rich Sommer, and Delilah voiced by Sissy Jones, and the duo play off each other wonderfully, with just the right chemistry to portray the awkward, lonely characters they both are, who find some small comfort in each other while being unable to confront their own failures. It's hard to oversell how well they work together and off of each other to carry the game, and when Delilah is gone for the few brief sections that she is, the world feels isolated and alone, sharply contrasted with the warm friendliness of Delilah, or the shared anxiety, or even the deep sadness. It's honestly pretty magical how it all comes together. Firewatch opens on something entirely different, a short text-based adventure telling the story of Henry's relationship with his wife and her decline with dementia. The choices don't matter beyond how they make you feel, probably raw and pained if you've ever lost someone. More importantly, it sets the tone for Henry, or some version of Henry as you see fit. Regardless of your choices, his wife is gone and he's in the middle of nowhere, incapable of facing that loss, isolating himself and leaving that problem behind him. The first act of Firewatch is characterized by a comfortable mundanity. Some teens in the woods having a campfire to scare off, conversations with Delilah, opening up to her or not, and her doing the same. The simple revelation that she too is here because she wants to escape difficult situations with her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend or whatever the situation is. The only real happening in the early game is an encounter with a mysterious figure watching you from atop a cliff, but even that's forgotten as soon as it comes for a period of vibes, drinking, watching a giant fire, flirting. If the summer of fire watching stayed this way, it'd be a comfortable way to escape the world, but Firewatch also isn't content to sit on that feeling forever, ripping it away from you is its greatest trick. It's not that the section has little to talk about, but it's largely experiential. It's a time for bonding that you get more out of by interacting with Delilah earnestly, and the more you do, the better the game gets. The later half of the game is characterized by a shattered peace and regret. It's where both of the main characters start to bump up against their paths and open up about their relationships, and as they do, they stumble into a minor conspiracy. A clipboard recording their conversations, a mysterious cough over their radios, a big fence that even Delilah was unaware of, Henry's tower being broken into. Henry and Delilah quickly go off the deep end, their boredom lulling them into seeing shadows. Someone is definitely out there, but the pair hype each other up, getting new radios, inventing elaborate theories about the fence, pondering if it began with a former lookout who lived with his son in the tower. The mood is uncomfortable and tension grows between the duo. The loneliest moments of the game happen here, and the research station beyond the fence confirms their worst fears, and the second Henry leaves, it's up in flames. The shift is hard, the little escapist fantasy falls apart pretty quick, and the two begin planning to leave. The fires are getting bad anyway, but it's just running away from another problem, escaping to start over yet again. The Wavefinder found in the research station offers a bit of a distraction, pointing Henry to electronic signals in the world, one of which leads to a backpack, much like another he had found earlier with a camera in it, with which Henry can take photos to memorialize his summer, and which houses a key to the lower areas of the cave, which he believes holds all the answers, and it does in some way. At the bottom of the hole is Brian Goodwin, the kid who camped out a few summers previously with his father Ned, an apparent hiking accident. It's a brutal and somber moment. A small slip and the kid died alone in a hole, forgotten to most of the world, and it's underscored by finding his belongings just before finding him, seeing a smart, dorky kid who was the only one not running away from something. There's no real playing it up in the story. Henry sees it and understands pretty immediately. A nice musical score creates a somber atmosphere as it clicks into place. There's no conspiracy, no elaborate plot. Ned, like Henry had before, ran away from something terrible and was fucking with Henry and Delilah to keep it from becoming known, ironically building Henry's drive to solve it. Delilah's in shambles, and it's essentially the end of the relationship. She blames herself for not reporting the Goodwins, misses Brian, loathes Ned for being a murderer, and if the Reddit posts about the ending are anything to go off of, a lot of players came to an equally uncharitable idea of Ned, despite the game's best efforts. Ned isn't a killer or a monster, probably. His audio tape to you is one of the very brief interactions you ever hear from someone new, and he spells it out fairly clearly, that he's a worst case scenario for the main duo. A man who loved his son and couldn't handle the pressure of his loss, who ran away and hid in the woods. He's angry at Brian for dying maybe, but he's also incapable of getting past his grief. He dragged Brian out there in the first place to escape his PTSD, if Delilah's a reliable source on that. If nothing else, the credits show a series of photos taken on Brian's camera of the two having fun together, enjoying part of their summer, and make it clear what Ned represents. Like everyone else in this story, he's a deeply flawed, broken person escaping loss. Nobody really wants to confront that pain, Henry, Delilah, or Ned. And with the fires merging and burning out of control, Ned goes deeper into the woods, never confronting the past he worked so hard to hide. Evacuation is coming, and Henry makes his way to Delilah's tower, but no matter what you say, she's gone by the time Henry arrives. As she says, her summer is ruined with the shadow of a dead kid hanging over it, but I doubt a proper meeting ever would have occurred. She doesn't quite seem the person, and she ultimately ran away from another relationship she was too scared to handle. That became something more than a silly little summer thing, and which is tied to even more loss. All while encouraging Henry to go back and see his wife, although ultimately if that would ever happen is up in the air. And all we're left with is memories, a roll of photos of the good times Brian had, and the photos you took yourself of whatever you deemed important. Firewatch is a nice experience. Despite not being much of a game, it was an interesting rumination on loss and avoidance, on running away. It made me feel a lot, and I related to Henry, and maybe even Ned, for the losses I've run away from. The game is sad, and it made me sad about the ways I've acted and felt, but equally, it's a very pretty game full of wonderful environments and serene vistas, capped off with a small pinch of great music. The leads are fun to listen to, they play off each other extremely naturally and well, and in the first act, it's just comforting to see them play off each other in that way, and makes it all the more painful when it all falls apart. My only real criticism is that it's, not much of a game, but it isn't like it's trying to be. It's just an interesting little experience that asks you to engage with it earnestly and considers the way it makes you feel, or to get a bit of a behind the curtain look at its production, which is decently interesting if nothing else. Firewatch is the first walking simulator I can say I enjoyed, and while it's certainly not my genre, I really would recommend giving it a shot to spend some time with the characters and take a nice summer away.